So then I started looking at new concepts of community, and the word that kept coming up was a sense of community. And these guys, Macmillan and Chavis, came up with 4 elements of a sense of community. And I think it's interesting, the phrase sense of community sort of is a bit more esoteric than Tonier's description of community and his 2 sides of community. And it also, if you scan down to number 4, introduces a much more sort of existential tone in terms of using a word that is usually banished or scorned in business and often in public life, which is emotion. You know, we talked about, Kirsten in her piece talked about membership and influence, and now I'm adding integration and fulfillment of needs, which is obviously, you know, people don't really talk very much about fulfillment, but people only stay part of a community if it's fulfilling what they expected it to fulfill. But I think that there's a bigger thing here, and I think it's to do with a shared emotional connection that these guys, Macmillan and Chavis, say, and the word emotion is something like that I said that people don't really talk about very much. And when you talk about emotion, you immediately then flip to, well, you know, people's experiences. Everything we do, everything that happens to us drives an emotion. It's all experiential. And if that's good and it makes us want to go back, then it provides the glue. And the glue is what keeps and builds our community. So when everyone is talking about community, they usually talk in the plural, as in lots of different communities. And me being a fairly simplistic soul, I tend to look and try and treat everyone the same, and that gets me into a lot of trouble usually, because I'm not very well house trained. I just kind of treat everyone exactly the same. Doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, or where you've been. But my feeling is that we are all the same, and if emotion is a driving force and a glue, then if we look at the people who are forming these communities, and we say it's people, humans, the human race, I'd say we're all basically the same. And my example for why we are the same, it comes, and this is where I start moving into language teaching languages and running a school and having a community that's a language school. When I started my first school in 1992 in central London in Soho, for the first few years, and I was in my 20s then, and I still had a bit of hair, if I went to a party, every time I went to a party, someone would say, oh, so who are the most difficult people to teach? What's the most difficult nationality to teach? And they'd always be surprised when I said none. No one is. And they said, well, why? What do you mean no one is? And I'd say, well, you know, most people are really nice, and about 1 in 10 has a problem with something, and it's usually a problem that they've had from something else, but they just have trouble dealing with things. So everyone's pretty much okay, and that always surprised people. But that kind of philosophy kind of goes through into what I've done with English Out There, insofar as you know, I think when we started teaching English Out There, which is involving our community, which involves us creating a teacher with some students, which is our community, and then they go and speak to people, there's always a big surprise, there's a shock that people are nice. And the thing that I think lots of people have forgotten, and that explains why social networks and communities exist online and are growing exponentially, and why people are happy to give of themselves in terms of crowdsourcing like Wikipedia, is that basically people are good. It's a very simplistic and maybe naive answer, but people generally are good. That's in my opinion. You know, when you get to, I saw someone in the text chat box saying, oh, when it comes to leadership, there's always fighting. Well, yes, there is, but when you put in ambition and money, then things get a bit different. But at the core, in simplistic terms, people are good. So if if you smile at someone, you say thank you, you wave to them, you pat them on the back, you give them some time, some help that they didn't expect you to give them, or they didn't ask for, then you want to go back and you want to play with them and you want to do stuff with them. This is my community meeting or enjoying some crowdsourcing. So let me explain. We go from, I've talked about people being good. Well, these guys down here, they're native speakers, members of the public in London, in central London, by the River Thames, and they're good, okay? And these guys are good. And when good meets good, they have a good time. Makes sense? And so this is my community, my students over here, and they're crowdsourcing. And they're crowdsourcing because they've come prepared. They know what they want to do. They're asking questions, and they're asking for help, and they're getting help for free from these guys, who are then giving them the information that's going to help them solve their problem or help them learn. So this is, in the middle here, in the microcosm, a crowdsourcing situation. And when these guys tell these guys something, then they go back to the teacher, and the teacher sees what reaction they've had from the interaction, and then the teacher amends the lesson plan, and then we publish the lesson plan. Then I've got crowdsourced content coming back from people like these guys, okay? And that's kind of how it fits in with the way we create content, and how I kind of talk about this thing called good. Most people, when they talk to someone they've never spoken to before, or they talk to someone online and they're nice to them, they're always really surprised. Every time we train a teacher to teach English out there, they're always gobsmacked that people are so nice. So how does this fit in with free and paid? Well, it might be a bit of a leap, but this innate goodness encourages people to, provide crowdsourced material, okay? And it's when I was researching this, I kind of thought, well, is our material crowdsourced? Yes, it is. We're selling it, but we're kind of selling it at a lot less than you'd expect. And I think that there's a way to kind of explain where things are going. I think this is where crowdsourced materials are going. Personally, I find a lot of free stuff online, which is crowdsourced and stuff like that, I find it quite incomplete. And I've coined a word here, frippy idealism. It's free hippie idealism, and sometimes it just doesn't work for me. But then there are companies that, and this is the D in paid, you can't ask people to crowdsource and then keep it to yourself and charge, purely for profits. Now the numbers here, you see 2, I say I would link that to Gesellschaft, which is, the self-interest, and I would link 1 to the unselfish or selfless pursuit. So this is where my sense of community comes in. Now I would add another one, 3, okay, which I've made up a word. I'm just mucking around with language here. So instead of free and paid, or freemium and premium, I'd say freedom, which maybe isn't very catchy, but also freed. And freed, the D in freed is from paid, and the rest is from free. So you can do what we've done, which is take crowdsourced material, you test it on your crowd, you professionally edit it and produce it, but then because of technology you can distribute it at a very, very affordable price. This is just an ad we had from 2006 that kind of shows you our view and is a bit grungy, and sort of says, hey, we're using the real world, but also we're using real people, and we're combining it, bringing it together, tidying it up, and then spitting it out, selling it, at a very reasonable price. And finally, going back to emotion, if you get it right, and your crowd, your community, and your content and the environment in which they're used works, you get deep emotional impact. And this is a guy who was one of the first students who did our course in London He was 18 then. And this, I think, is what, if you get it right with your community and your crowdsourced material, and I say we don't get it right every time, but this is the kind of experience and emotional impact you want to aim for. Thanks very much.